Give me a sense of where you think we are.
Well, we've been brought back from the brink, but we're not out of the woods. And let me tell you why I think we are still in you might say, a precarious position. While growth has started to resume, it's not likely to be sustained. It's likely to get much weaker. But the core problem are two. First, a very high level of unemployment. More than 1 out of 6 Americans who would like a full-time job can't get it. This includes people who have jobs but working part-time, can't get a real job. 40%, more than 40% of those who are unemployed today are long-term unemployed for more than 6 months. That's so important because the longer you're unemployed, you drain your cash reserves, and particularly for young people, a period of should be building up skills. Those skills, their training becomes weakened. And we know from previous downturns in the United States and elsewhere that young people who have experienced, or other people who have experienced protracted periods of unemployment are much harder to bring back into the labor force. And when they do, their wages are markedly lower. And then there's the problem of the foreclosure, which is what started the crisis in the first place. The pace of foreclosures is expected to be higher in 2010 than in 2008 and 2009. We've done nothing about almost nothing about the underwater mortgages, where they owe more money than the house is worth, and more than 25% of those with mortgages are now underwater. Now, there are some additional problems that we're about to face. Commercial real estate, about $500 billion of commercial real estate has to be rolled over.
Loans that are coming due and they've got to
be rolled over somehow. Right. Many of those are underwater, many of those are securitized, and those are very difficult to roll over. In the old days, where you had conventional banking, the banks might have rolled them over, holding their nose and closing their eyes, with the view that maybe with luck, somewhere down the road, things will get better. Bank examiners, supervisors, are less willing to engage in what's called forbearance because they've been very criticized for having not done their job in the last 5 years. And with a securitization, it's almost impossible to roll over these underwater mortgages. The first of these problems came to the fore in the bankruptcy of Stuyvesant.
Right.
And that was a multi-billion-dollar failure.
By one of the most reputable land development and real estate firms in the city of New York. And then when it came time to pay the loan, they couldn't do it.
And that's symptomatic of what we're about to see over and over again. Two more problems, if you're not feeling bad enough. The states have a shortfall of about 200...
The states.
Right. Of $200 billion a year in revenues, down from what it would normally be because of the recession. And many of the states depend very heavily on property taxes. The states have balanced budget frameworks, which means that when the revenues go down, they either have to cut expenditures or raise taxes. That's equivalent to a negative stimulus. And so far, the federal government's been picking up about a third of that gap. But with the stimulus coming to an end in 2011, the question is, what will happen? And you just came back from California, where you see the future in a way. Teachers, university professors on furlough, 2 days a month, on the way to being laid off. And a whole set of problems in a number of other states. So these are among the sort of clouds hanging on the horizon.
And so therefore you believe that the consequences of all these things are?
That the economy will not be able to sustain the growth that we've seen in the last 2 quarters. There will be a marked slowdown, possibly into actually a double dip, which is another recession. But the bottom line is, for what most people care about, jobs, growth will be too slow to provide new jobs for the new entrants in the labor force, and certainly too slow to reduce the unemployment from the very high level that it is. So there's going to be a lot of stress both in the labor market and the housing market unless we do something more than we've been doing.
And what would that be?
Well, that comes to the view, I think we need a second stimulus. We need a large second stimulus. A lot of deficit hawks are around there saying we can't afford it.
Yeah.
And I would say we can't afford not to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was the
You have to put people to work first.
You have to put...
Then you can worry about the deficit.
Yeah. Moreover, you know, it was the short-sightedness of the banks that got us into this trouble. We ought to be looking not at the deficit, but the long-term debt. If we take, if a large fraction of this money goes into investments, education, technology, infrastructure, and we underinvested in all these areas for years, all we need is a return of about 5 or 6%, and then we get more tax revenue from the growth in the short run. We get more tax revenue from the growth in the long run from these productive investments. And our long-term national debt will be lower as a result of running a deficit today. And that's what we should be focusing on.
What size stimulus are you talking about?
Well, the way I like to think about it is the size ought to be appropriate for the depth of the downturn. So, for instance, one of the key pieces of what I've been calling for is making up for the shortfall in revenues of the states. So right now, that shortfall is about $200 billion. If our economy remains weak, we're going to have to make up for that. If the economy recovers, then the amount of money we'd have to put in would be that much less. And if I were an optimist, I'd say it's going to recover, but I don't know, and I'm a little bit of a pessimist seeing the kinds of problems that we face.